Welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. Tonight, we're going to talk to an angel. I've told you a little bit about her in regards to my run in the 25th District for Congress. I ran into Ruth Sanchez, who helps people and is more decent than maybe anyone I've ever met. And I wanted to make sure that you guys met her too. So Ruth is the Antelope Valley chapter president for the ACLU, but she's a lot more than that. Ruth Sanchez, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming. Thanks for all the hard work that you do. So first, I want to talk about your advocacy for the homeless. So I've seen you feed the homeless all over the Antelope Valley. For those unfamiliar with the LA area, that's the high desert, which, yes, believe it or not, is in LA County. That's Palmdale, Lancaster, that area. I've seen you give them food. I've seen you give them shelter. I've seen them give them your phone number to call at any time, which is, it rocked my world. But so first, explain to me how your role at the ACLU leads you to doing all this wonderful work with the homeless.
Well, I was advocating for about 7 years, 5 years before I founded the ACLU Antelope Valley chapter. And I saw a lot of different things that were happening and I needed assistance. Obviously, I have been with the ACLU now going on 12 years, SoCal ACLU. And I figure, you know what, it's time to bring it to the Antelope Valley. We had I had issues with law enforcement, and we had Antelope Valley was just found guilty of racial profiling. So we knew we had an issue, and I decided to bring it to the Antelope Valley and just spread from there. And it was just more than just, when you think of the ACLU, you think that everything is legal, we got to sue somebody, but there's a lot more. Our chapter does a lot more: advocacy, education, outreach, and we actually do services.
Yeah. And so, look, I ideologically agree with the ACLU probably 90% of the time. There is actually some disagreement philosophically, but it's folks like you who give the ACLU a good name. So when they see you out in neighborhoods and the communities doing all this wonderful work, and they associate that with the ACLU, I think that is invaluable. But let's talk about the homeless a little bit more, both what I saw you do with my own eyes, but also in a second we'll get to what you need help with today, because with coronavirus there must be massive issues. So in this particular case, Lancaster has that city is a uniquely problematic in the case of the homeless, and that's where you took me to a homeless encampment in the desert, where during the winter it's freezing, and obviously during the summer it's scorching hot. And it was one of the most moving things I've ever been a part of. So, Ruth, why are they in the desert?
Well, the reason being is a lot of the homeless, they tend to gravitate to Lancaster because that's where the resources are. Palmdale has pretty much washed their hands and say, we don't have a homeless issue, but that's not true. Is just the fact that we don't have services in Palmdale. The few services they're in Lancaster. And they were driven into the desert because the mayor of Lancaster doesn't want them in the city of Lancaster because it doesn't look good for development and whatever else, you know. So they drive them 5 miles into the desert, into county land. So it makes it even difficult because they don't have vehicles to get to these places. And I always say homelessness in the high desert is a lot different than homelessness in LA. You know, you're in LA, you have a gas station in every corner to use the bathroom, to get a glass of water. Not here in the Antelope Valley, as you saw, there isn't. There is a lot of, they have to walk. And if we don't take their services to them, sometimes they don't eat.
And so what was the policy that drove them out, though, past the district line, if you will, or the city line? Because I know that the mayor in Lancaster has said some awful things about the homeless. He said it should basically be illegal to try to give them food. And I think that's probably what Jesus would have done, arrest anyone trying to help the needy. Rex Parris, of course, Republican. He said to carry weapons in case you run into the homeless, which is beyond imagination. Anyway, but why are they outside the city limits then? The ones that are in the desert encampments?
Because they're left alone. Because the city of Lancaster doesn't have a reach on them. So not only that, of course, when the count comes, they say, "Oh, we don't have that many homeless individuals," but of course that is not true. So is the city that is pushing them out. They have a new task force, law enforcement that, pushes them. They red tag them. They give them a red tag for 14 days, and then they come with bulldozers, and they literally bulldoze things. And actually, in Lancaster, when they were bulldozing one of the tents, there was a gentleman inside that tent.
Jesus Christ. So, Ruth, I've seen you give your number to homeless folks. So do they call? And what do they call about?
Oh, absolutely. My phone doesn't stop ringing. And the reason why I give them to them is because how am I going to do advocacy if they cannot reach me? And I mean, my number, I give them to them so that they can call. They'll call for, they need water, they need food. Couple of the individuals that you got to meet, as you see, I have a relationship with them. So they will call me and say, "Ruth, we have no food, we have no heat, and it's really cold." So that's when, not just myself, and as much as I would like to take credit for everything, I have a really good team. And the community, as you saw, they come together. I mean, they come together, 75 people or whatever, they come together and they help me. When we're able to take them blankets, clothing. I actually had one of my volunteers take off her shoes and hand it to the lady because she needed shoes. So, that's just the way I feel we need to do advocacy. So,
Ruth, I saw your team's wonderful, but you are their leader, and you lead by example. If we had a functioning democracy, it wouldn't be me or Christie or any of the Republicans running for office. You'd be our representative. That's the way that it should work. But before we get on to the current problems, which we got to get to real quick, is there a way that folks can help? Where would you direct them if they wanted to help in this situation?
Definitely. I would go ahead, and I know that you're going to hate me for it, but give me a call. I don't have a problem. My number is all over the place. Twitter, my Twitter account, Ruth Sanchez. My cell phone number, 661-202-4912. I don't ask for money, but what they could do is they can go ahead and send the items to an address that I can provide once they called. And we take all of these items to the people, doesn't get stored. That's just part of the group that we do, because our advocacy even goes further to the deported veterans and TJ. So, right now we're in need of warm clothes. The heat's coming up, so we need hats, backpacks, shoes are always in need, socks, food. So you can always just send any of that.
So Ruth, what are the current problems that the homeless are facing in the middle of coronavirus?
Well, right now, because before we had to kind of cover what the agencies were lacking, the county and the city, we had to come in and kind of take over and cover the gaps. Well, right now we're not able to cook. So what we're doing is curb drop off. We drop off a bag with goodies and we call and say, "Hey, pick up your bag," and it's there. A lot of individuals are not able to eat because these places are only serving meals twice a week. And I'm sorry, but can we survive with 2 days a week? That's only 4 meals and for 7 days. The showers, they don't have access to bathroom. Mind you, they did drop off 7 washing stations that are not maintained. So no bathroom, no porta potties. The bathrooms in the parks are closed. So where are they supposed to relieve themselves? So it is making it harder because organizations such as ourselves or community leaders like myself, we're not able to go into the desert and do what we want to do. So we have to do kind of drive-by drop-off, but we're still servicing them. I mean, the calls are still coming in.
While everyone else is afraid to go outside, you guys are going out and providing needed relief for the homeless. And, you know, we didn't get to touch on all the other work that you do, but I saw you again with my own eyes. Every weekend day, every off day, you'd go and drive somewhere else to do to help other people and organize communities. Ruth Sanchez, you are the best of us, and it was an honor to meet you in the campaign. And I hope we have you back on to discuss any other drives that you're doing to help folks in the community.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
I'm here today to announce the program known as DACA is being rescinded.
We don't run our own country. We've lost our democracy, and all we have left is rage.
Where are the Democrats? I would be on every cable news channel screaming and yelling and talking about what the Republicans are doing right now.
How do you expect us to get excited to show up to the polls for these loser Democrats? How come we have nothing but cowards who'll never fight? Primaries are everything.
Building a great wall on the southern border.
You have politicians who fearmonger about disenfranchised groups.
The first attacker came through the visa lottery.
Now they are against legal immigrants.
Ending chain migration.
They don't want people from those countries coming here because they're fucking racist. This guy's an absolute monumental disgrace to all of us as Americans.
I ordered to launch precision strikes on targets.
That is what I was warning about for literally years on this program. This is what they promised they would do if they got into power, and what do you know? They did it.
I've now shown dozens of videos on the Young Turks of cops handcuffing people who are bleeding to death. His life means nothing. We have been trained to be cowards, so we're gonna handcuff that guy bleeding to death.
What does this law mean? These are all just basic BS coverings.
To every politician who is taking donations from the NRA, shame on you.
They said that this was impossible, but now we're beginning to move that boulder. And at the end, we'll get our democracy back. Primary the living hell out of these Democrats, and let's take over the party. That's a ghost ship. Let's board it, and let's take it.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watch the show in the morning.
Whenever I had a bad day in high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
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 Mayweather will knock out Pacquiao. Floyd beats his wife.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. We're all shut inside because of the coronavirus situation, obviously, and a lot of folks are watching Netflix. Makes sense. So am I. If you are, you should check out this show called The Innocence Files. The reason it's called that is because they're working with the Innocence Project and showing you different folks who were going to be executed, but it turns out they didn't do it, and they have been released. So they are incredible stories, compelling stories with compelling filmmakers. Almost everybody that worked on this project has won some sort of award, and that includes our next guest. Andy Grieve is the Emmy Award-winning director, and he directed episode 8, which is called Hidden Alibi. Andy, welcome to the Young Turks, brother.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Tell us who the subject of Hidden Alibi is.
It's the story of Alfred Dwayne Brown, who was convicted of a 2003 murder of a police officer at a check cashing in Houston, Texas. And from the day he was arrested, proclaimed his innocence, had a very solid alibi. The trial took 2 years, and he was ultimately convicted of murder of a police officer who was the first responder who showed up on the scene of the crime. And he was sentenced to death row in Texas. That's a pretty easy thing to have happen to you when you're a minority. And he really had, basically from the second he was arrested, he had no fighting chance because of all the systematic things that were stacked up against him. Luckily, he found some great advocates and lawyers who eventually fought his case, and he found his way out of jail. I'm reluctant to give away too much of the story because it's such a wild story how it played out.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it is a show, and it would be a spoiler alert in a sense.
Right.
But I do want to discuss some of the details because they're important to the national conversation.
Right.
And good to hear that the lawyers do good work. They really do. They get a bad rap, and of course it depends on the lawyer. Yeah, but in this case, why did they think it was Alfred in the first place, if they ever thought that?
Basically, it was just word of mouth. Like some people, there was a housing project called the Villa Americana that he didn't live there at the time, but he had a girlfriend that lived around there, and he was basically a player in that scene, and he was also an easy person to sort of frame for this murder because he wasn't from Houston. He was originally from Louisiana, and he was a bit of a fish out of water, and he was a little bit not as street savvy as some of the other guys, and his name kind of came up, and as soon as that happened, the cops just were all over that, and it just steamrolled in every possible way against him. But there was no DNA, there was no fingerprints, there was no eyewitness putting him at the scene. I mean, there was just nothing that you would see traditionally in a case that would put someone on death row.
Well, I'm glad they gave him the death penalty on that. It's unreal what they.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is from 2005. It's not like this from 1965. No. I mean, it's like a stereotype. Oh, the guy that stranger from out of town. Let's frame him.
Right.
He must be the dangerous one.
And the people who they decided to believe were highly irreputable. There was not a lot of good eyewitnesses or even anecdotal accounts of where he might have been that morning. It was just worse than hearsay.
It's also amazing to me that they don't actually want to solve the case of a person who shot a cop. Like, don't you want to catch that actual guy?
Well, that's the thing. They just and to this day, unfortunately, people in the police community in Houston are still holding on to that, and so it was so emotionally charged that this guy who was almost ready to retire, he showed up to the scene, and this awful tragic thing happened to him, and they wanted so bad to have someone who committed that crime more than they wanted the truth, and they let that go on for over a decade, and to this day, full justice has not fully been served for Dwayne, which is just unbelievable.
Just quick aside here, because justice matters on both fronts. Did they ever catch the real guy who did it?
No, and they haven't really even looked for him. And there's bits of evidence. We couldn't go into all this in the show because of the runtime, but there was some people that they should have looked into closer. And from our research, it's very clear that there's things people are not saying that you could probably get people to talk about. And but no, they didn't. They just want to say Dwayne's their guy, and they want to keep saying it to this day. And
if the family has got to be. I mean, if I was part of the family, I can't speak for them, but if I was part of the family of the victim, I'd be so mad that his former colleagues aren't actually trying to get the guy who did it. So if you watch the show, it's crystal clear that Alfred didn't do it.
No.
There's
and knowing the guy, he could not have, and the ways in which the police try to still say that there was a whole thing in the story with the phone call. His alibi was that he was at his girlfriend's house and he made a phone call, and that's always been the crux of his alibi. And the police to this day have concocted this bizarre story about how it was actually a three-way call, and he had this mastermind scheme where he called his buddy, who then connected it to the other place to make it look like he made the call. I mean, it's just like, if you know the guy, if you've met Alfred Dwayne Brown, he is not a criminal mastermind. So it just strains credulity in every possible way.
Yeah. So to me, in a lot of these cases, and in this one in particular, the misconduct of the prosecutor is what shocks the conscience.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the alibi. So basically what this prosecutor did, Dan Rizzo, he more or less threw Dwayne's alibi in jail until she was willing to change her story and lie under oath in the trial to be the basically star witness in the crux of the prosecution's case. So he took a woman who had no prior record. She was a young mother, from a community that doesn't have a great relationship with the police to begin with, throws her in jail for 6 months until she's finally willing to change her story. And there's these transcripts of the grand jury where she's just being badgered by the grand jury to basically, you're not telling the truth. You're not telling the truth. And they say things to her like, you're not even going to be able to get a job flipping hamburgers at the McDonald's, just terrible, terrible things when you should think that a grand jury process, at least, I mean, people make the joke about a grand jury that it'll indict a ham sandwich, but at least it will do that within the realm of truth. This was just full on blatant witness badgering. And for a long time, it worked. They got her to go to trial and lie, and we finally got her in the show. She's the first time she's spoken out about this ever for this show. And she was on fire. She was just finally, after 15 years, was just ready to let this all out. And it's a really great interview.
Yeah. And was there any cover up of evidence that the prosecutor knew about?
I mean, there was. It's hard to know exactly who knew what when. But yes, ultimately the alibi was able to be proven by records that were found in a detective's garage who was involved in the case, and he just miraculously stumbled upon this box of records. The thing that we've never been able to figure out is why did he turn that piece of paper in after all those years and not just shred it? So there's different layers of convolution to this, but what's always clear is that the story that Dwayne told the day he was arrested is the truth of what happened. And which prosecutor knew what when, it's hard to say, but they clearly suppressed this evidence. And there was an email found a decade later that showed that they discussed the evidence, and it just miraculously disappeared from the server, only to be found a decade later in a box in a guy's garage. And none of these people have been held to account whatsoever. That's the most infuriating thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the powerful are never held to account. I remember the grand jury of the cop who shot Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. Yeah, instead of badgering the witnesses, the so-called prosecutor in that case wound up helping the defense. He presented the defense's case, which never happens in a grand jury. But that's when a cop is in front of the grand jury. When you have someone in the opposite situation, they badger and badger and badger until they get the lie that they're looking for. I mean, so what is it? Is the motivation just like advance my career? If I put somebody on death row, that's a notch in my belt. And so
I think in this case specifically, to me, it seems that they wanted so bad to have a perpetrator of this crime against one of their brothers, one of the other cops, that they were just willing to do whatever it took to put a face to that crime. And clearly no one ever felt bad about it because no one's expressed any remorse whatsoever. But it is a systematic thing that's happened across all these cases. And you see this, there's 3 in the series, there's 3 that are about this prosecutorial misconduct. And it's so prevalent because people don't have the means to fight against it, you know. And another person in the case, you know, took a plea deal. It was his gun that was used in the crime, but he took the plea for 30 years because he knew that was his better opportunity. And this is a bad guy who had a long record. So it just shows you how good people who are doing the right thing get caught up.
But that's why shows like this are so important, because now finally when you show the injustice, people get pissed, and they should.
Yeah,
right?
And I think that we lay it out in a way that's very simple, and I think people can just understand that no matter what side of the aisle you're on or where you're from, like this is just, these injustices need to stop, and hopefully we can raise awareness about that.
The series is called The Innocence Files, and episode 8 is Hidden Alibi. Andy Grief, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and thank you for doing this.
Just a quick question. You spoke about Governor Cuomo. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on some of his remarks from earlier today, where he basically said that were New York to be pressured to be open, it would cause a constitutional crisis, and he basically said that you declared yourself King Trump. So I'm wondering if you've heard those thoughts.
I've declared myself as king because of me.
It's Wednesday, gotta get down on Wednesday. Anna
Don't try to make me
Kasparian.
feel better.
John Iadarola.
I'm mad. Okay, and I'm gonna stay mad.
Don't be mad. John had problems with his like insanely perfect camera setup right before we went live. And so he unfortunately had to downgrade just a little bit to the camera he's using now, and he's in a bad mood about it. You look great, John.
Yeah, it makes total sense that after I'd done a million videos today, I could see my image in Skype, but it doesn't transmit. So that makes sense.
No, you sound like me on the very first day that we did the show remotely. I was so angry and like frustrated with technology and didn't understand why are there so many different types of ports and cords? Like that's the big thing.
Oh my
like,
God, yeah.
And how do you keep track of the cords? Like it's just a jumbled mess in here. But anyway, we're here. The content is what matters. I think you look great. And we're going to put together a great show. In the post game, we will be talking about a number of stories that I'm really excited to, take a little deep dive into, including Cardi B's interview with Bernie Sanders, which was just really great to watch. And we have other topics as well. But of course, lots of big updates on the coronavirus, including the direction that Trump is planning on going in when it comes to reopening the country and the economy. There's actually some positive news to update you on, so we'll get to that. So without further ado, let's get started. There has been more and more pressure by Republican lawmakers toward Donald Trump in order to preemptively, prematurely, however you want to call it, open the country back up, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic with a virus that we still do not have widespread testing available for. And so one of the interviews that has caught many people's attention has to do with a GOP lawmaker out of the state of Indiana. He's Representative Trey Hollingsworth. And he believes that it's imperative, incredibly important, to open the economy back up immediately. And the way that he made his argument was not delicate, to say the least, and certainly not humane, to say the least. But without further ado, let's hear what he has to say.
The decision that needs to be made is to get Americans back to work, back to their jobs, back to their businesses, back to school, back to churches. That's the decision that needs to be made. We have to recognize that no amount of money out of Washington, D.C., no amount of effort out of Washington, D.C. is going to solve this problem like Americans can solve this problem. That's the strength of this country. We've got to understand that and get Americans back to work, back to their businesses, back to school, and back to churches. That's where they want to be when I talk to them every single day. There is no zero harm choice here. Both of these decisions will lead to harm for individuals, whether that's dramatic economic harm or whether that's the loss of life. But it is always the American government's position to say, in the choice between the loss of our way of life as Americans and the loss of life of American lives, we have to always choose the latter. It is policymakers' decision to put on our big boy and big girl pants and say, this is the lesser of these two evils, and it is not zero evil, but it is the lesser of these evils, and we intend to move forward that direction. That is our responsibility, and to abdicate that is to insult the Americans that voted us into office.
So, John, I feel as though the candid nature of some of the responses coming from Republicans really does give us reinforcement for what we've been arguing for a long time when it comes to a number of issues, including, by the way, climate change, right? Mm-hmm. So we think that human lives are worth saving, even if it means that we need to sacrifice our way of life, whether it be temporarily or even permanently in the case of climate change. For Trey Hollingsworth, his lifestyle, his nice capitalist American lifestyle, is way more important than saving as many lives as humanly possible. He thinks that it's the lesser of two evils to sacrifice human lives in order to maintain, the economy, businesses, and his lifestyle.
Yeah, it's not the lesser of two evils. There is one evil, and it's him telling other people to go die for his stock portfolio. That's literally the only evil. What you saw there was profoundly corrupt, profoundly cowardly. He started off with a very Pete Buttigieg-esque sort of mishmash of words that don't really mean anything about this is for America to fix. Yeah, technically, the doctors to come up with a vaccine. Outside of that, no, it is not on regular workers to get out there to fix a pandemic. They're supposed to be protected during a pandemic in the same way that we would expect people to put on their big boy pants and protect them if another country's army was storming our borders. In the same way, I don't want you to die from a bullet from a foreign soldier. I don't want you to die from a disease either. And for him to say there that it's like cowardly to keep the economy shut down, that we should put our big boy pants on is really awesome to hear. I'm sure he'll be the first there. You know, people at like supermarkets have been dying in mass numbers recently, transit workers. We're seeing a lot of that. So put on your damn big boy pants, Trey Hollingsworth, and go bag some groceries, okay? If you believe that it's American like stick-to-itiveness that's going to get us through this, then go out there and expose yourself to the coronavirus, as so many American workers are already having to do right now.
Exactly. And when it comes to the people who are fighting this virus on the front lines, the CDC just reported that more than 9,000 healthcare workers have tested positive for the virus, have contracted the virus. But keep in mind that that is an underestimate. So the numbers are actually likely much higher than that. And so we're not only risking the lives of people who don't take this virus seriously in the first place when this type of talking point or misinformation gets out there, we're also risking the lives of people who are sacrificing so much just to be on the front lines to keep people alive, right? Mm-hmm. The lack of, concern for average Americans is incredible to me. And how candid some of these lawmakers are is just really disturbing. Politico reported today that while some Republicans are still expressing caution and emphasizing that restrictions need to be lifted gradually. Now, Greg Abbott, for instance, is an example of that. He believes in a gradual, lifting of some of these restrictions. Others, though, are being more aggressive and calling for an off-ramp. For instance, Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona said it should have happened yesterday, meaning we should have already opened the economy back up, even though, again, we do not have widespread testing available. It's incredibly difficult for most people to get tested. Even in Los Angeles, where testing is more available compared to other parts of the country, you have to show symptoms of the virus in order to qualify for the test. The reason why this is an issue is because there are asymptomatic people carrying this virus, and it's actually based on some of the studies that have come out recently, it's easier to spread the virus when you're in the early stages or when you're asymptomatic. And so we're still learning quite a bit about this virus. We still don't have the proper infrastructure in place in order to appropriately respond to increasing numbers of people who contract this virus. And it's so unbelievably irresponsible and disgusting to hear lawmakers publicly make these statements and simultaneously pressure Donald Trump to open the economy back up. Yeah. But the positive update is that Donald Trump had an hour-long meeting with business leaders. And usually you don't start that off with, we have a positive update. But he met with CEOs and business leaders from the banking industry, food, hospitality, retail. And to my surprise, these business leaders told him, we cannot open the economy back up until we have widespread testing available. And then after that, Trump was like, oh, we need widespread testing. We need to wait until we have that testing available. So luckily, he is listening to those leaders, and luckily they have some morality when they give Trump this kind of advice and encourage him to hold before opening things back up.
Yeah, and I hope that he's able to maintain that position mentally for maybe 36 hours, maybe 48. He wanted to open things back up last Sunday, as of about a month ago. That would have been an absolute disaster. He was cautioned against doing that, backed off from the position. About a week went by, and then he started saying, yeah, we probably need to open things back up. And so what would have happened? I mean, we know the numbers now, like we've experienced the past week. Andy Biggs said it should have happened yesterday. Andy Biggs, do you know what did happen yesterday? I know what happened yesterday. 2,407 Americans died of coronavirus yesterday, close to double the amount that died the day before. And what's today going to look like? It's going to be higher than that. We're going to set another record for daily deaths, reported deaths, by the way. 2,400 didn't actually die. It's far more than that, but that's the number that we actually have, so I'm going to go with it. And more are going to die today. Hopefully that number will eventually go down. It looked like it was a couple of days ago, and that didn't hold. The number went up, and that's with social distancing. That's with continued quarantines at their highest level that we've had. As soon as you start opening that up, unless you have the testing infrastructure in place, unless you have incredibly lenient sick leave and personal quarantining without losing your job, those sorts of policies, those numbers are going to skyrocket. And unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately, it's unfortunate that we have politicians that are pushing for that. It is fortunate that they're being very open about it, that their desire to feed countless thousands of Americans into a wood chipper, if that's what it takes to improve the NASDAQ, they are being very, very obvious about that. And with an election on, hopefully we can use this information and replace some of these absolute ghouls.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that people need to be aware of how little these lawmakers value their lives, and they're supposed to represent you. Keep in mind that the only agreed upon role for the federal government, this is what both Democrats and Republicans are supposed to agree on, right? Is they're supposed to keep the public safe. And as we've seen from Trump's slow response to COVID-19, he failed in doing that. And to see some of these Republican lawmakers goading him into failing even harder is just devastating and depressing. One other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, when you look at the number of fatalities, you also have to keep in mind that a lot of these hospitals are already overwhelmed with coronavirus patients. And so some of the other patients who needed medical attention, maybe some surgeries, haven't been able to access our healthcare system, and they've been staying home. Some people have died from various illnesses because they haven't been able to get the adequate care that they need to survive. So while it's not a direct coronavirus death, you also have to think about all the indirect deaths that are happening because of how broken our healthcare system is, how overwhelmed our healthcare system is, and how slow Donald Trump was to respond to this very serious pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't stop Donald Trump from seeking brownie points. So let's talk about that in our next story. Donald Trump has delayed stimulus checks to millions of Americans in an effort to ensure that his signature is on those checks. Now, there are two ways in which Americans will receive the stimulus money that was granted to them by Congress. One way, of course, is through direct deposits. Some Americans have already seen that in their bank accounts today. The only way that you'll get the direct deposit is if you shared that type of information when you filed your taxes with the IRS. However, if you did not, you're likely going to have a check mailed to you. Some of them will be mailed to Americans as early as next week. But keep in mind that the checks were delayed. They were delayed several days because Donald Trump insisted on having his signature on those checks. Now, I think that it's important to have a political strategy discussion about this, but before we do so, let me give you the details on what's happening. So the Washington Post reported that the unprecedented decision means that when recipients open the $1,200 paper checks the IRS is scheduled to begin sending to 70 million Americans in coming days, President Donald J. Trump will appear on the left side of the payment. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented. So there have been various examples of stimulus checks mailed to Americans, happened during the Bush administration, happened during the Obama administration, but they did not politicize it the way that Trump is. And obviously Trump wants the brownie points because he wants to get reelected. When people see the stimulus money, they want to associate it with Trump. It'll be the first time a president's name appears on an IRS disbursement, whether a routine refund or one of a handful of checks the government has issued to taxpayers in recent decades, either to stimulate a down economy or share the dividends of a strong one. So, John, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. You know, of course, this is a narcissistic move. Of course, he's exploiting this for political gain. But do you think it'll work?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'll give you my thoughts. You're probably hearing my dog's thoughts. He's not happy about it. He's barking outside. He's trying to participate in the howl that people are doing, but he's not even doing it at the right time. In terms of the checks, what I think is pretty amazing. That's really getting annoying. What I think is amazing is, do you recall not too many years ago when the right-wing position was that Obama was giving everyone phones to win their support, and every Democratic candidate was promising free stuff to get their support, just buying people off. So this is stimulus that's much needed, that has effectively nothing to do with Donald Trump, but he wants you to believe that he's the one that's providing it to you, which under one condition I would be perfectly happy with. He is, after all, a billionaire. Feel free to shell out some of your own money to these people, many of whom are voters, devoted fans of yours that could desperately need the help. Feel free to send Trump checks. Cut $1,000 checks to people and start sending them to random Americans if you want the support. Barring that, this isn't your goddamn money, so you don't get to put your name on it, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with you. As I said earlier today on TDR, if it hadn't been in the stimulus bill that these checks were cut, do you think that Trump would have vetoed it and insisted that the American people get relief? Does anyone believe that that would have happened? Does anyone believe that he was pushing behind the scenes for the checks to be larger? Or maybe the fact that because they're just one-time payments, which are going to be wholly inadequate to deal with the shortfall that most people are going to have economically, the millions that go unemployed literally every week this around now. Does anyone think that he was pushing for them to be recurring, that every month we should get checks of this sort? No, he had nothing whatsoever to do with this, less than most politicians. Their names aren't on it. His name shouldn't be on it either.
So I absolutely agree with you. And I totally forgot about the Obama phone. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's a perfect example of the type of hypocrisy that we see from the Republican Party. But it's what we've become used to. Of course, they're hypocrites. Of course, they're going to criticize Obama or the Democrats of one thing and then turn around and do something even worse than what they're accusing the Democrats of. And so I think that a lot of this has to do with messaging. And I think it's really, really important for Democrats to drive home the point that their checks, Americans and the stimulus money that they desperately need, was delayed because they had to put a system in place to ensure that Donald Trump's signature was on those checks for political purposes. But they're losing the messaging war as of today, because I've been paying close attention to how the media has covered this story. And of course, what do you think the Trump administration is going to say? They're going to argue that, no, actually, you guys were expecting these checks to get to you 5 months from now, but you're going to start seeing them next week. So we got them to you early, right? And so instead of, maybe digging into that argument and seeing whether or not there's some accuracy to it, what we're seeing from so-called journalists in the mainstream press is, oh, well, Democrats are saying this, the checks are delayed, but the Trump administration is saying that. Anyway, Trump's signature is going to be on those checks. Let's move on to our next story. And so I actually do think that this is going to end up being politically advantageous to Trump, because there is an emotional connection to that money, right? People are desperate right now. They need it. And if they see his name on there, they're going to associate that economic relief with Donald Trump, even though, as you mentioned, and you're absolutely right, he and the Republicans fought tooth and nail to destroy any real economic relief for average Americans in that legislation, including trying to destroy what Democrats did luckily succeed in, which is providing a more robust unemployment insurance program.
Yeah. And, it's been a couple weeks since they passed that. What have they been doing lately? Is there anything about to be passed? Trump must be pushing for it because, again, he loves these stimulus checks, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, you're right. Republicans haven't proposed anything. In fact, Mitch McConnell has fought against a phase 4 stimulus, which was proposed by Nancy Pelosi. One other thing that we're seeing from Congress right now, and I actually think this is a great solution, and I wish it would get more attention. Representative Ro Khanna and Tim Ryan are proposing $2,000 per month for the next 6 months. So Americans can basically have some income to fall back on in the middle of this pandemic, and they want to continue providing this economic relief to Americans until our economy is back to where it was before the pandemic. So it could actually extend past 6 months. So we're seeing some proposals, some good proposals coming from Democrats in Congress. They need to keep fighting for these proposals to pass, but they are being fought against by the Republicans.
Yeah, we can disagree about the amount. I know Bernie was saying more than 2,000 per month. I don't remember exactly how months it was going to be for, but yeah. And look, if your concern is that the economy is falling apart, people won't be buying. That's what the Republicans are saying. They're willing to kill countless people because of that fear. Okay, then put money in the hands of the people who are going to spend it to survive in the meantime. That seems like a great way to stimulate the economy without producing a massive pile of unnecessary corpses.
Absolutely agree. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, though, we have more important updates on COVID-19, including what we're seeing from the Trump administration when it comes to providing health care to deal with this pandemic, and the unfortunate response by Democrats. So there's equal criticism to go around today. I'll give you the details on that and more when we come back.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Cenk Uygur joins us.
We are progressive and unapologetically so. Very happy to say that millennial and Gen Z generations are massively progressive along with us.
Democrats, they've been so weak for so long. For God's sake, fight for your side.
I would not like to compromise with Republicans. I would like to defeat them. Lynn, do you support Donald Trump?
Yes, I like Donald Trump.
Well, that's why we think you're racist. The 5 black kids in Central Park did not commit the rape. He said, who cares? Keep him in prison anyway. They probably did something. He's a terrible guy. Very fine people on the side chanting, Jews will not replace us. He says we should ban all Muslims. Well, that's bigotry by definition. He said it during the campaign trail over and over again. Called Latinos criminals and rapists. See, you're used to Republicans being strong on television and Democrats cowering. New day in America. Progressives, we actually fight back.
We found the perfect person to lead the Army.
Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT, everybody. I was about to say the post game, but the post game is not happening yet. We will have one today, though, and we're going to discuss Cardi B's interview with Bernie Sanders, along with some other stories that we have prepared for you and some personal stories. So that's always fun. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. Also, a few other announcements. Something I actually announced yesterday, John, was the climate special that you will be hosting for Earth Day. So Earth Day is April 22nd, and John will be interviewing a number of climate experts and scientists in order to celebrate Earth Day. So again, that'll be on April 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you check that out. Also, if you want some additional content from TYT, our very own Malcolm Fleschner puts together these awesome newsletters that you guys should definitely sign up for. I love them. His writing is excellent. He's funny. He's punchy. So just go to tyt.com where you can sign up for the newsletter and hear from Malcolm on a regular basis. Again, like, he does such a great job in writing. He's really funny. So make sure you check that out. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what's happening with healthcare, because that's a huge, huge issue right now in the middle of this pandemic. So Donald Trump has, believe it or not, overseen a pretty massive federal expansion of healthcare due to this coronavirus pandemic. And his actions have actually significantly outflanked the mainstream Democrats, including Biden. And that's an issue, because if our number one priority in the general election is to beat Donald Trump, then we need to be clear on how to do that, and we need to be strategic. And what we're seeing from this, this cynical president who actually doesn't really care about the average American is a policy change when it comes to healthcare that can be considered way more effective and way more to the left compared to what we're seeing from Democrats. So let me give you the details, okay? Because I think the details matter. I think the amount of money he's spending on this matters. And I think comparing it to what we're seeing from Democrats matters. So the Trump administration, according to Politico, is already pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into a key health sector that it previously vowed to rein in, expanding Medicare benefits and boosting payments to state Medicaid programs by an estimated $50 billion, while promising to directly pay for coronavirus treatment for thousands of uninsured in what some experts say mirrors a single payer system. And by the way, some of those experts are actually on the left as well. So this isn't some rebranding that we're seeing from Republicans. And the numbers are there. Rather than going through Congress and making this more complicated, the federal government has decided, all right, these hospitals need help. We need to provide some relief to people who don't have the money for the COVID-19 treatment. So let's just immediately fund the hospitals and make this funding available to them. So over the last few weeks, for instance, the Trump administration has green-lighted legislation that sends $100 billion in aid to frontline providers, including hospitals that administration officials have fought with for months over plans to tighten pay rates and require more financial transparency. The Trump administration also separately authorized billions more in loans to cash-strapped hospitals and doctors through the Medicare program. When it comes to Medicaid, the Medicaid spending is estimated to total $50 billion over the next couple years, a figure that could soon be dwarfed by Congress's next round of injections into the healthcare system, still scrambling to catch up with the fast-spreading virus. Again, look, I'm bringing this up not because I genuinely believe that Donald Trump is a warrior for reforming healthcare. No, Donald Trump is a goon. Donald Trump only cares about himself. He only cares about getting reelected. And this is the type of stuff that he will then cite on the campaign stage or the debate stage, if that ever happens at this point. I don't know. Everything is really up in the air. And what is the response going to be from Democrats, and namely Joe Biden? So far, what we've seen from Democrats is the proposal to reopen enrollment for the Affordable Care Act, which doesn't go far enough, guys. Let's keep it real. It doesn't. And we don't want to be in a position where Donald Trump can position himself as more of a warrior for healthcare than the Democratic Party. So I know that there's a lot of focus right now on Bernie supporters and whether or not they're going to turn around and vote for Biden. I get why there's concern about that, I guess. But we also need to apply pressure on the Democratic Party to really, do something substantive and aggressive in expanding healthcare for people who are scared right now and who don't have the means to pay for these treatments.
Yeah. This is good. So let's give him credit. You're doing the responsible thing because you have a commitment to ethics that most people in media don't these days, and you're giving him credit for this while also not being so uncritical that you'll pretend that he's had a sudden change of heart or something like that he actually cares about it, that he won't potentially reverse these in the future. So you're doing the responsible thing. And what we have to add, of course, is that, let's see, why did he hate John McCain? Why does he still mock him to this day? Because John McCain stopped him from absolutely killing the ACA a couple of years ago. He wants people with pre-existing conditions to be thrown to the wolves, unable to get health care. If he had his way, he would press a button that makes that the case right now. Just in February, he proposed a budget that would cut $1 trillion from Medicare and Medicaid. So we have to acknowledge both facts, that he is, in the short term, adding some money that'll be very helpful and necessary, especially in a time of a pandemic. And as soon as he is not worried about getting reelected, he's going to go back to doing the sorts of cuts that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. On Biden, the reopening the enrollment in the ACA is virtually nothing, obviously.
Yeah.
No credit for that. Now, that obviously is not everything that he has planned for healthcare in the future. What he has planned is also not enough, but we should acknowledge that that's not the entirety of it. That's what he wants to do right now to help with the coronavirus. And no, he doesn't deserve virtually any credit for that. Hopefully behind the scenes, both Bernie Sanders, who is going to be putting as much pressure as he can bring to bear on Biden, hopefully he'll push him in the right direction. They seem to be trying as hard as they can to court AOC, who's obviously, this is going to be one of her main concerns as well. But they need to demonstrate that they're listening to that and they're going to actually do something. The onus is on them now.
You're absolutely right. Look, we're in a moment of crisis. And this is the exact opportunity to make your case for a robust healthcare reform proposal, right? And we aren't hearing anything from Biden. I mean, Biden's like hiding out somewhere. And again, look, if the Democratic Party's #1 priority is to get rid of Trump, they really need to think about their own actions right now. They're way too concerned about Bernie supporters. They're way too concerned about trashing them and preemptively assuming that they're going to do all these terrible things. Like, okay, how about focus a little bit on the things that you can control right now, which is providing real solutions for people who are experiencing this moment of crisis. And to your point about, opening up enrollment for the ACA, there was an excellent piece in Jacobin that talked about how this really isn't much of a solution. And I want to give you the numbers. So for instance, a bronze plan with no premium still carries an average deductible of $6,506. And doubling down on ACA isn't just bad policy, it's bad politics, providing Donald Trump with an opening to posture to Biden's left and repeat the same playbook Trump used against Hillary Clinton in 2016 when he cynically campaigned on a promise of universal health care. He is a schmuck and he is a liar And he will do anything and everything to lie to the American people to get reelected. That's where I'm coming from. Again, I want to be clear. I don't think that Trump is like some secret leftist who's looking to provide health care for all. I mean, he has been brutal to our healthcare system. He's been brutal when it comes to government spending on our social safety net. But come election time, he will do what it takes to get reelected. And this is something that Democrats need to be hyper aware of. And it doesn't, their actions doesn't make it seem as though they are.
Agreed.
So it's frustrating. We're in a frustrating situation. And it's just like the messaging really does boggle my mind. Anyway, why don't we take another quick break? And then when we come back, a story that I have been attempting to avoid, but I have to do my job. Bernie Sanders has endorsed Joe Biden. He has done an interview with the Associated Press, which has been considered controversial. We'll talk about that and more when we come back.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the U.S. and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're going to make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's going to win. She's going to win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cohen.
Populist left wing with a gigantic victory in Mexico.
Senator Gillibrand, you have made a pledge to no longer accept corporate PAC money.
Women came out in record numbers in the primaries.
They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries.
Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and, of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
let's
flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay, this is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy! This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was
That's a good point.
1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. So as you guys know, there is a lot of negative news about some of these big banks and the giant bailouts that they've been getting. And so you might be wondering, where should I do my banking? I want to bank in an ethical way. I want to bank at a place that won't invest my money in dirty fossil fuel companies. Well, Aspiration Bank is the place to do it. You can learn more by going to aspiration.com/TYT. In fact, for every purchase you make, they will plant a tree, which is awesome because trees are great. John loves trees, right, John? In fact, didn't you tell me that in Lord of the Rings, that one scene where the trees come to life and they like save everything, was like a scene that made you emotional?
Yeah, in private, I told you that.
I love that about you. It's like the sweetest thing.
They
anyway,
go to war.
I know they do. They do. Trees are awesome.
They'll
go to war
under the end.
So definitely check them out. Aspiration.com/TYT. Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit about. Go ahead.
Super fast. I want to take away some of the credit you just gave me. So I just saw on Twitter, Trump was asked about his name appearing on the checks, and he says, "I don't know too much about it, but I understand my name is there." So he didn't have anything to do with it. He just found out that it was on there. He wasn't involved. It wasn't his idea.
Nobody would have known my name would have been on those checks.
Oh.
He's so full of it. It's incredible. He's a clown. Anyway, but some people believe that beating that clown should be the top priority. So let's discuss that. Bernie Sanders has not only officially dropped out of the Democratic primary, he has also officially endorsed Joe Biden. Now, he did so in a video that was posted this week. Let's take a quick look at what he had to say.
So today I am asking all Americans, I'm asking every Democrat, I'm asking every independent, I'm asking a lot of Republicans to come together in this campaign to support your candidacy, which I endorse, to make certain that we defeat somebody who I believe, and I'm speaking just for myself now, is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. A president, and you made this point, who downplayed this pandemic, who ignored the advice that some of his people were giving him.
So he went on, and later he had an interview with the Associated Press where he had a pretty aggressive message for some of his supporters. We'll get to that in just a second, but I wanted to get your reaction, John.
To the endorsement in general?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Look, he said he was going to. He said over and over and over again because reporters would never accept that he had already made clear what he was going to do. So they kept asking at every debate and every interview, are you going to eventually endorse the eventual candidate, regardless of who it is? And he said over and over that he would. And so he's consistent. That's one of the best characteristics of Bernie Sanders, is that he is, unlike other politicians, not a giant liar. And so, honestly, if you're very surprised that he's doing this, you must have sort of assumed along the way that he had been lying or that he would find some way to weasel out of it. But Bernie Sanders is not a weasel. And so he is doing what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I was not surprised. I knew it was eventually going to happen. And I also had a feeling he was eventually going to drop out, but it didn't stop me from, catching feelings on the day where he did drop out. In fact, that was last 100%. Week, and we did the show together, and it was incredibly hard to stomach it. Yeah. But that's where we're at. And so you're right. He did say repeatedly that he was going to not only endorse whoever the Democratic nominee would be, and in this case it's Biden, but that he would do everything in his power to help defeat Donald Trump. So the one thing that I wanted to just comment on in that video was just like how ridiculous it is for Biden to pretend like he's surprised that Bernie's about to endorse, that Bernie just endorsed him. He's like, oh.
Never in my wildest
I'm exaggerating,
fantasies.
but like, oh yeah, you guys were just chatting it up. It was just a random conversation, and he surprised you.
I just thought you wanted to talk about the latest episode of Westworld, Bernie. I didn't know you were going to do this.
It was so ridiculous. But following that endorsement, there were a number of people, including the Democratic Socialists of America and his national press secretary, or former national press secretary, Brianna Joy Gray, saying that they do not endorse Joe Biden. And so Bernie was asked about that in an interview with the Associated Press. And he said the following. I want to give you his statements. He said, "Do we be as active as we can in electing Joe Biden and doing everything we can to move Joe and his campaign in a more progressive direction? Or do we choose to sit it out and allow the most dangerous president in modern American history to get reelected? I believe," and this is the controversial statement that was released ahead of the full article being published, "I believe that it is irresponsible for anybody to say, well, I disagree with Joe Biden. I disagree with Joe Biden, and therefore I'm not going to be involved." And then Sanders said he would not actively campaign or spend money on advertising in the primary contests that are still on the calendar in the coming months, but he still encouraged Democrats in those states to vote for him, hoping to amass as many delegates as possible for leverage to shape the party platform and the direction of Biden's campaign. So he's hoping that he can, have some leverage with the number of delegates he has, so he can, push Biden in a more progressive direction. I want to quickly be clear about how I'm not ever going to buy that Biden's going to follow through on anything substantively progressive, right? I think that Biden is going to be better than Trump on a lot of things, including maybe avoiding war with Iran. I think that Biden will be better when it comes to maybe re-implementing Obama-era environmental policies. But I don't think that he's actually going to take on the fight for Medicare for all. So he might use that rhetoric during the election. I just don't trust that he's actually going to follow through on it once he does get elected. But a lot of Bernie's supporters are now angry with him on social media, and I'm not really sure that makes sense either. I think that there are things that you could critique Bernie on. He could have been a little more aggressive in fighting against the massive bailouts for these corporations and big banks, for instance. That's like a recent example I can give you. But how are you going to be mad at him for doing what he literally said he was going to do over and over and over again?
Yeah, or, well, at least you should have been mad at him about it the whole time, I guess. Look, you can disagree with him. I think that a couple of his quotes there were probably oversimplifications of some people's position, that he was setting up dichotomies that are actually sort of a spectrum of different activities that you can take part in. There's a number of different ways that you can work towards a goal, I think. And so, look, and he'll expand on it, but those quotes are probably oversimplifications. But that said, look, if anyone gets to have a position to advocate for it based on the amount of work that they've done to almost single-handedly push the country in the direction it needs to go, I think he's earned a lot of goodwill in that area. So I'm gonna extend that to him. But yeah, look, in terms of the endorsement stuff, he was going to do it. We know that. He hypothetically could have waited a little while, again, as leverage, because he is interested in leverage. I mean, he said that in terms of getting the delegates. In terms of, like, I hope that he doesn't take the bait on, like, people like Brianna, for instance. She's a private citizen. Like, she doesn't work for him anymore. She's back in journalism. She gets to do or say or support or endorse or not whoever she wants. And when statements from people like Brianna are brought up to him to try to get him to denounce her, it's not like there's anything he can say that's going to get these people to give him an ounce of credit. It is just used as a weapon to bludgeon him and people who are affiliated with him. So he should not take the bait on that.
100%.
What isn't it? Like, not everybody 100%. Is going to endorse him and don't have to. That doesn't mean that they're rooting for Trump. And as long as they're very clear, like, what the worst case scenario is here. Yeah, a lot of these concerns are not honest, that are going to be like handed to Bernie to answer for. Bernie is doing everything that he said he's going to do, and he has been consistent. He's been saying that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president in the history of the modern America. He said that a million times. He is working to get him defeated, but that is never going to be enough for some people. And so I hope that he doesn't take the bait sometimes.
You know why it's not going to be enough for some people? Because I think that there's this issue with lack of responsibility when it comes to Biden's campaign and his supporters. So let me just explain what I mean. Look, there's been all this emphasis on shaming Bernie Sanders supporters who refuse to endorse Joe Biden. But I think some of that energy, a significant amount of that energy actually, needs to be applied to the Biden campaign to do better. Because right now, based on what we're seeing from Trump, including, putting his name on those stimulus checks. I don't agree with it. I think it's narcissistic, and I think that it's a political game he's playing. But unfortunately, it'll work. It'll work. He understands marketing, and he understands how to pretend to come from the left, when he is criticizing his political opponents in a general election. He did that with Hillary. He's certainly going to do that with Biden. So what are Democrats doing right now to prepare for that? The onus can't 100% be on Bernie Sanders supporters. That's ridiculous, right? So there needs to be a moment of clarity for the Democratic Party, because right now, Donald Trump is approving billions of dollars toward healthcare providers so he can literally provide the funding necessary for people to get COVID-19 treatments paid for, right? Yeah. That's the kind of stuff he's going to cite when he's on a debate stage with Joe Biden. That's important to fight back against that messaging and provide something even more robust than what we're seeing from Donald Trump. So my point is, I get that Democrats are super concerned about getting Bernie Sanders supporters to unify with the party, but they also need to have a moment of self-reflection and see where they're falling short, because I think they're refusing to do that. And that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, and I'll try to be fast. So not endorsing someone is not the same thing as hoping that they lose, or not voting for them, or not working toward whatever. I've voted for hundreds of politicians through my life at various levels. How many have I endorsed? 3? Endorsing is a special thing that goes up above and beyond. It's basically you saying, I want to use my influence in the most obvious way possible to push for this person. And in fact, I want my who I am to be tied with the possibility of them succeeding. But I've voted for tons of people that I've never endorsed and won't endorse. And so trying to conflate those two things as being the exact opposite just doesn't make any sense to me. And again, part of the pressure that you're talking about that's being put on Bernie Sanders supporters, a little bit of it, I think, is genuine concern. Are they going to support him? Is it going to be the thing that loses it? But a lot of it is just they have loved for years attacking Bernie Sanders supporters. And if they think they have a way to do it, they will continue to do so, even though, what is going to end up happening? The vast majority of the people that supported Bernie Sanders are going to end up supporting the Democratic nominee. There are always going to be some people that don't. That's been the case with literally every nominee throughout history. They're just choosing to focus now on it to tar the entire movement, okay? And by the way, and if they're being honest, if they want to move those people, attacking them viciously, how is that possibly going to work? It's 100%. Pointless. It's offensive and pointless. It's wrong in every way that it could be wrong. And so either have your fun while you can, if you're being fake, and if you're being honest, you really need to strategize, because this is a horrible way to go about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just so counterproductive for what Biden supporters claim they want. But on the other side, I also just want to note, look, I think that people should vote their conscience, okay? And so I've never been a huge fan of vote shaming, except I did, take the bait on election night when I vote shamed white women who voted for Trump. But that wasn't the right way to go. I've admitted that. I just don't like it. I don't agree with it. And we should think about, why are people voting this way? And I think that same standard should apply for some of the Bernie supporters that I'm seeing on these social media outlets, or social media platforms, I should say, who are kind of viciously going after other Bernie supporters who have decided, okay, well, I'm going to vote for Biden, right? Because look, your life might not be significantly negatively impacted by Trump. I mean, I can't imagine that a lot of those people exist. But there are people who have undocumented immigrants in their families. There are people who have seen a significant decline in their quality of life because of the Trump administration. I don't agree with vote shaming them if they've decided to support Biden. I think that it's important to, again, vote your conscience. And for the Democratic Party, if you guys really believe that beating Donald Trump is your top priority, you need to act like it. And that doesn't mean you go around harassing Bernie supporters. It means that you have that moment of self-reflection, see where your flaws are, and think about what Donald Trump's marketing and messaging is going to be in this general election. Because I don't think that there's been enough thought in that at all. And I haven't seen much from Biden at all, which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we have one more story that we got to talk about. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now the only member of Congress who has addressed the sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden. These allegations were brought forth by a former Senate staffer of his. Her name is Tara Reade, and we've covered her story pretty extensively. So she was working for him in Delaware, and no one in Congress has addressed it until someone finally asked Representative Ocasio-Cortez about it during an online conversation with The Wing. It's a networking and community space for women. So the questioner, according to CBS News, opposes President Trump's reelection, but also really resents the fact that the other choice is someone who has a really long history of being creepy to women. And AOC responded with the type of response that I really do respect. She said this: "What you're voicing is so legitimate and real. That's why I find this kind of silencing of all dissent to be a form of gaslighting. I think it's legitimate to talk about these things. And if we again want to have integrity, we can't say, both believe women, support all this until it inconveniences you, until it inconveniences us." And then she says, a lot of us survivors, and it's really, really hard. A lot of us are survivors, and it's really, really hard and uncomfortable. Not discussing allegations is the exact opposite of integrity, the Congresswoman said, adding that it's not okay to prioritize beating Trump over discussing sensitive Me Too issues like these because they are very legitimate things. And Tara Reade did see the statements and was happy to find that finally someone in Congress addressed them. And so she said to CBS News, "I'm very humbled and honored because she is literally the only politician that has spoken up on my behalf." So I think that AOC is absolutely right. We need to have integrity, and we can't treat these claims differently based on what's convenient for us.
Yeah, 100%. And what's interesting is that she's not in Democratic leadership. They're probably going to try to keep her out of it for as long as possible. And yet, despite not having the title, she is a leader on this. Bringing environmental protesters into the halls of Congress to start a movement for a Green New Deal, like consistently on the most important issues. She speaks out passionately, intelligently, and without requiring a crowd behind her to do what she thinks is right. It doesn't mean that she's perfect. No one is, but she is consistently on the right side of these issues. She's consistent and honest, and I appreciate her. Hopefully, for some of the politicians who aren't as comfortable as her to come out and talk about this sort of thing, these sorts of issues, without knowing that it's safe to do that, maybe now with her being out there, others will follow. We'll see. Hopefully, over the next week, maybe others will start to speak out about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a disturbing experience to see just how differently Tara Reade has been treated by the very people who took Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's allegations seriously. I took those allegations seriously. I take Tara Reade's allegations seriously because for me, sexual assault is not something that I care about based on political factors. It's something that's serious and should be addressed. And I'm glad that AOC did address it in the way that she did. That integrity and that consistency is so critical. And, I'm just disturbed at the silence from people like Elizabeth Warren, for instance, who wrote a super lengthy piece in the New York Times about Brett Kavanaugh, but has not addressed Tara Reade's accusations. And she endorsed Biden today. And I would love to hear what she has to say about these allegations. Anyway, our post-game show is next. We're going to talk about Cardi B's interview with Bernie Sanders and more. Become a member. Go to tyt.com/join. For everyone else, we'll see you soon. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the post-game show. Anna and John with you. I am going to stay away from Twitter for probably the remainder of this election cycle because I don't want to know what anyone has to say about our segments today on the primary race.
I'm
because it's like
thinking about it, about backing off.
You have to, because it's just, you can't win. And you really do want to share your opinion and analysis without being influenced by what people have to say on social media.
Well,
you know,
and I know you're not supposed to say this, but, and also to be influenced by a fundamentally non-representative sample of people think about something that you said. Right.
And I just think that I just don't want to indulge that nonsense. Like, I think, anyway, it's what sucked the energy out of the last election, and it was toxic and brutal, and I just don't want to be part of that.
Well, it's like the situation's going to be bad enough as it is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, we are left with two pretty terrible options, right? Now, Trump is, I think, demonstrably worse. But anyway, let's talk about happy stories that involve Bernie.
Yay, let's do that.
Fun. So this is a fun, light story. Let's do it. So one of Bernie Sanders' biggest supporters is Cardi B. And so now that Bernie has dropped out of the Democratic primary and endorsed Joe Biden, Cardi B wanted to have an interview with him and ask some questions about what to expect moving forward. Who's Joe Biden? Is he worth voting for? So we have two clips to show you. Let's go to the first one.
I'm very excited, and I'm excited too that you're endorsing Joe Biden. And I will want you to tell my platform, why are you endorsing him? Like, why should we vote for him?
Well,
and
a couple
how
of
can
reasons,
we spread for us to vote for Joe Biden?
Okay. First point is that when I announced that I was running for president, and there were like 18 people running, you know, what I said is, if I don't win, and I tried hard to win, I will endorse the Democrat who wins, because Donald Trump is, to my mind, the most dangerous president in the modern history of America. This is a guy who lies all the time. He doesn't believe in science. He downplayed this whole coronavirus, which has led to the deaths of many thousands of people unnecessarily. He doesn't believe in the Constitution. He thinks he's above the law. So this is a bad news guy that has got to be defeated. And I will do everything that I can to defeat him. What I am also trying to do right now, Claudia, is to work with Joe to see that he becomes a more progressive candidate. Right? Mm-hmm. In other words, what I want to see him stand for, which he will, is to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour, to make sure that all of our young people have the opportunity to go to college regardless of their income. All right? To cancel student debt for a lot of people. I would go further in all of these areas than he goes, but he is moving in the right direction. He's moving in the right direction on immigration reform. I think you will be pleased to hear what he has to say. I know that criminal justice and the number of people who are in jail today, often African American or Latino, disproportionately, is an issue of concern to you. I think you'll be hearing him making some pretty strong statements about the need for criminal justice reform to make sure that we're not throwing young people into jail, but getting them the education and the jobs that they need.
So that was actually the substantive part of the interview. I want to get to the fun stuff, but everything that he listed there is true. And Trump is a threat. And I get that people get frustrated when we find ourselves in these lesser of two evils situation. But I guess Biden's a lesser of two evils. If that's the measure that you want to focus on, it's just demonstrably true. So thoughts before we get to the fun stuff.
First of all, I never would have imagined that, like, following this big endorsement, he goes to explain it on Cardi B's live video stream. It's just such a weird world that we live in right now. But man, what an amazing evolution for an individual over the past few years. I don't mean Bernie, I mean Cardi B specifically. I'm excited that her show was picked up for a second season. Very much looking forward to that. And maybe another season of interviewing prominent politicians. Like, she should keep this going. Like, have AOC on next week, then do Ilhan Omar or something.
No, I love, there's something to be said about her style and her candid nature. And there's something just refreshing in how she talks about politics, because it's not like some annoying, unattainable, hard to understand, stuffy conversation. Like, she's a normal person. Yes, she's a celebrity. I get that. But her understanding of politics, I think, is above average, relatively speaking, to a lot of people. And she has a way of communicating her points in a way that's just accessible to a lot of people, and it's fun. Like, sometimes I want to talk. I want to have fun with talking about politics. Like, I hate that you have to like today, the Trump administration noted today that, like, it's just, I hate it. I hate it. Like, it's the way that I'm now, like, kind of trained to talk and communicate and present stories. And unfortunately, that's the way people supposedly take you seriously. But I love her way of communicating. It's entertaining, it's easy to digest, and it's easy to absorb. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that it's probably somewhat, like, unconscious, but I wouldn't feel that great, like, pressure. You should know by now that there's literally nothing we can do that'll lead to people taking us seriously. We can talk however we want. People aren't taking us seriously. But yeah, just informal and fun. Come on, the Damage Report. Come on. It's early. I'm just getting caffeinated. We can just chat.
I watch some of her, like, Instagram videos that have nothing to do with politics, and I respect her honesty in a lot of cases. So let's watch the next video real quick.
That's my mom calling.
Okay. Say hello to your mom for me. All right. We're trying to make sure that everybody has all of the health care that they need right now. All right. So people are ending up in the hospital. They can't even afford the treatment they're getting. If their families get sick, they don't have any money. We're trying to make sure that everybody has health care by expanding, having Medicare cover all health care bills. Second thing, very importantly, other countries around the world in Europe and elsewhere have done it. We want to make sure that people continue to receive their paycheck.
So, so he went back to substantive stuff. But my favorite part is like, say hi to your mom for you, and then that like super awkward pause.
Yeah.
And then like when I first saw the video, it was like with Bernie, like all you can see is Bernie's eyes, like half of his head and Bernie's eyes, like looking up, and then you see her with like her hair and her nails, and it's just such a crazy world we live in.
I wish I could I think he does a pretty good job outside of that moment of being very comfortable with the sort of people that you would not expect that he would in terms of like style of communication, all that stuff. I wonder, what does he really make of Cardi B? Like, he's now done multiple things with her or whatever. They're like, better friends than I am with most of my friends. But I wonder, like, initially, because it's so far removed in so many ways. I really do wonder.
So I forget which publication found these old videos. I want to say it was the New York Times, but I could be wrong. Anyway, they found these super old videos of Bernie Sanders interviewing people when he was mayor of Vermont. Might have even been before he was elected mayor of Vermont. And there was this one video of him, Burlington. I'm sorry, Burlington, Vermont. Let me be specific. Vermont's a state. Burlington, Vermont was where he was mayor. And so there was this video of him interviewing like some teenagers at a mall, and they were very different from him, okay? Not like, I think they were goth or something, right? And so the reason why that stood out to me is because he didn't brush them aside as like illegitimate people to talk to. He took them seriously. He wanted to hear what they had to say, and he had a great conversation with them and heard their political views, And so he's never struck me as the kind of person who just like, writes people off based on how they look or what kind of culture they're part of or what kind of genre they're in. Like,
yeah, definitely.
And I really respect that about him. I love that about him.
Yeah.
He's
great.
He is great. I'm sad.
I know. Let's not get started. This is supposed to be happy half hour.
I know. Not happy half hour. That's coming later.
This is a happy half hour.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we actually do have a breaking news story that I want to share with you. This broke after we went live, so please bear with me as I gather the details. So Donald Trump, during his coronavirus press conference today, threatened Congress if they refuse to basically confirm the people he's nominated for his administration. So Trump threatened to use his executive power to force both chambers of Congress to adjourn if the Senate did not confirm his nominees for vacancies across his administration. This is being reported by various sources, but I'm reading from The Hill right now. In fact, here's a direct quote. He said, "The Senate should either fulfill its duty and vote on my nominees, or it should formally adjourn so I can make recess appointments. We have a tremendous number of people that have come into government, and now more so than ever before because of the virus and the problem." So lawmakers in both chambers are not expected to return to the Capitol until May 4th, but both the House and the Senate have been conducting pro forma sessions in the meantime. That means the Senate is technically in session and Trump may not make recess appointments. This is just another example of Donald Trump wielding his power to force Congress to give him exactly what he wants. It's incredible. He's doing this with governors when it comes to opening up the economy. He claimed that he had total authority to force governors to open up their local economies and roll back social distancing guidelines. And he's doing this now when it comes to his own nominations.
Yeah. I mean, this particular thing, I don't care too much about. I do think, though, that the fact that we're weeks into this thing and we still don't really have a formal process that would allow our government to continue to function inside of DC remotely is insane. Other states have been able to do it. Brazil has a functioning system. Other countries too. Why can't we do that? And that's important, not specifically so that he can, put through, I think I read like the new head of Voice of America or something like that, but so that they can get back to work crafting legislation that's going to assist regular people who are going to burn through that stimulus check instantly, assuming they actually get it. It might take a while because of the whole signature thing, but assuming they get it, or the small business loan program that apparently is about to run out of money today. I have a feeling some of those small businesses will probably still be in trouble tomorrow. So they do need to get back to work. Whether they get to, these appointments, it's not something that the Senate has really prioritized in past years under a different president. But they do have a lot of work to do. And a system needs to be set up that allows them to do it.
Yeah, one thing I also just want to make sure is on everyone's radar. Remember, one of the big stories recently was that the Trump administration decided to fire the inspector general who is going to be in charge of overseeing the bailout money that's going to be given to these corporations. We're talking about trillions of dollars. And this was one of the safeguards that Congress put in place to ensure that the Trump administration itself didn't end up like looting those funds for its own purposes. And so Trump wants to get one of his loyalists confirmed in that position now that he's fired the inspector general for the Department of Defense. That was the person who was going to oversee that funding. This is disastrous. This is the kind of stuff that you would expect from Donald Trump. And I want everyone to always be aware that when we're in a moment of crisis, usually an administration, especially a Republican administration, will do whatever it takes to roll back whatever civil liberties we have left. And we're certainly seeing that with Donald Trump. We certainly saw that when it came to the EPA letting industries know that they can go ahead and do whatever they want. They can pollute during this pandemic, that they're not going to be the watchdogs while this pandemic goes on. I did a story on that. These are actions that we need to be hyper aware of. And it really does roll back not only our civil liberties, but various regulatory protections that we have.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, the struggle continues.
All right. Well, you know what? I'm going to skip ahead and talk about Cuomo because this story's fun. And it's a surprising, I guess a surprising update. I don't know. So recently we gave you a story about how Chris Cuomo, one of the top hosts at CNN, had a little bit of an existential threat during his Sirius XM show, which, by the way, I forgot. The name of that show is Let's Get After It. So,
is that really?
yeah, which I love. Anyway,
yeah, he likes it. He's sticking with it.
He is sticking with it. So during one of his recent episodes, he talked about how, he felt like he was wasting his time doing what he does at CNN and how he hates indulging these hyper partisans who come on the program to debate. But then later he walked back his statement and said, he was having a moment. And I was candid too. I have those moments where you just feel down and you feel like what you're doing isn't making an impact. I think it's a normal feeling to have. But one of the other things he mentioned was some biker guy who apparently came up to him and said some mean things about him, and he wanted to tell him off, but he couldn't because you are expected to behave in a certain way when you are a public figure. So The Hill reported that biker has filed a police report against Chris Cuomo. The report filing with the East Hampton Police Department came after Cuomo shared a story on his Sirius XM radio show on Monday about a, quote, jackass loser biker who got in his space because he was in the front yard with 2 women and 3 children at the home, which is still under construction. So, by the way, when I hear biker, I think of like motorcyclist, but no, this was a bicyclist, like not an actual.
Yeah. I assumed it was a biker too.
Yeah, because when you hear biker, you think of motorcycles, but no, this was a bicyclist, and you like my imitation of bicyclist.
That's how they ride.
Yeah, that's how they ride. The Long Island bicyclist is actually a 65-year-old man who only identified himself as David. He told the New York Post that he decided to file a police report to document the alleged incident in case he feels that this guy is a threat to me. So here's what David said. He said, I just looked and said, is that Chris Cuomo? Isn't he supposed to be quarantined? David said after one of the two women there approached him, I said to him, your brother is the coronavirus czar and you're not even following his rules, unnecessary travel. And so he alleges, remember, this is what he's alleging, that Cuomo responded by saying, who the hell are you? I can do what I want. He just started ranting and screaming, I'll find out who you are. Cuomo responded, according to David. He said, this is not the end of this. You'll deal with this later. We will meet again. If that's not a threat, I don't know what is. Huh. So again, this is the perspective of David. We weren't there. We don't know exactly what happened. But I will say this. Look, it's interesting to hear like Cuomo's experiences and how much he hates being approached by people who criticize him and are aggressive. As a woman, I've had it happen to me a number of times, and it can be intimidating and it can be scary at times. And you don't want people up in your personal space, especially when you're with family, right? Like I get really guarded when I'm around family, and like my husband has a podcast and I'm a terrible wife because I just won't promote it. Because like people are terrible, and I'm like obsessed with protecting him, and I just don't want him to go through the stuff that I go through. So like I get Cuomo's perspective. At the same time, like I don't know if he threatened this guy. If he did, he shouldn't be threatening, private citizens. But again, we don't know. We don't know for sure. Just going based off he said.
Yeah, well, you remember the video of the guys, on like Long Island or something like that like came up to him, and the whole origin of the Fredo thing that every Trump lover tweets at him 100 times a day. So that does imply to me that the idea that he might threaten someone is not impossible to imagine, because we have seen it. But it also tells me this probably happens constantly. And that video coming out probably led to a lot of people wanting to get into his face just to see, what kind of reaction they can get out of him. Maybe they can record it. Like imagine the daily toll of people like that coming after you just constantly. And the fact that Trump talks about him all the time on Twitter, attacks him constantly too, and attacks other members of his family. Like we might disagree with members of his family on any number of different political things, but that probably leads to a lot of harassment, which is annoying. And if he's already sort of questioning some aspects of this job, what it's achieving, what is even possible to achieve in media these days, then, in a time when he's worried about the life of him, his own life, the life of his family, whether they're going to be healthy, that's probably put him over the edge.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think people, because we live in America where people have been told over and over again that fame is the greatest thing in the world, that being known is the greatest thing. I actually think it's one of the worst things, especially if you're known but you don't make any money, or you don't make like $6 million a year like Chris Cuomo does, right? Like, because the whole point of being known or being famous or being a public figure is like you can leverage that for, better earnings, for instance. But anyway, that's beside the point. Regardless of how much money you're making doing what you do, if you're working in a job that requires you to share political opinion in an incredibly toxic political environment, people come up to you and it feels threatening at times. And, it's one thing for you to personally feel threatened. It's even worse when you're surrounded by people that you love and care about. And like at the very least, it's annoying. At the very worst, it's threatening, and you get protective of your family and the people around you. So I just want to share that perspective, because I think people are under the assumption that like if you're rich or if you're a public figure, like you're like some superhuman that's like above it and won't, get rattled by something. But people get rattled because the threats are real, and like, some of the way people communicate with you when they disagree with you these days can get scary sometimes.
Yeah. And buckle up for the rest of the election on that note.
Yeah, 100%. Anyway, we have like 5 more minutes left, and I want to shoot the shit with you. Okay.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah. So we are now, what is this, like the 3rd week or 4th week we're working remotely?
I don't know. It feels like it's just always been this way. Like the idea of going to the studio and like, you know, Angel and Marissa show up, we go get coffee. That seems impossible to even imagine now. Or like the food truck shows up. Ooh, what's it going to be? Like, I can't even imagine. I think it's the third week, maybe the fourth.
Yeah, I think it might be the fourth, but I could be wrong. No, it's been, I'm like coping with it better this week than I did last. I think it's just because I'm getting used to it, and the weather's been a lot better in LA. Let's keep it real, like the sunshine. It's hot. It's hot in this room right now.
Sweating right now, yeah.
But I don't know. Like, it's just, I'm so happy that the weather's changing at least. And I love the summer. Like, I like hot weather for the most part. So I don't mind that.
Yeah,
but like,
I was just to say, I don't really mind. I'm lucky enough that, you know, I can do most of a version of my job from home, which not a lot of people can do. And my home environment is a lot easier than some to exist in. So I have it, I can totally acknowledge that I have it very easy in comparison to what the experience must be like for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
And also
like,
that TYT has, like, the fact that, you know, they're being very helpful in this. We haven't been furloughed. We are hopeful that things will go back to normal and our jobs will still be there. That's the sort of, we have a sort of foundation that not a lot of people have, and makes it a little bit easier to like chill out and, you know, just be at home.
So I'm going to say something, and it's going to sound like I'm sucking up, but believe me, I don't need to suck up. It's just, I think that being in management is not fun. It's actually a pretty shitty place to be because all you hear is complaints, including from people like me, and you never get public positive credit for the things you do. So I just want to give a giant shout out to management at TYT, because they're the ones who coordinated all of this to make sure that we'd be able to work from home. Judith, who is our programming director, head of programming, she was like the first one who was like, there's a fucking pandemic. We got to get our shit together. And she was like, you know, pressuring everyone to like get our ducks in a row and be prepared. You're right, John. Like, we're so lucky to still have our jobs. And part of the reason why we're lucky is, yes, management prepared, but you guys, the members, you guys have really kept us afloat throughout TYT's entire existence, but certainly during this difficult time. And I just feel grateful. I feel grateful that I have health insurance. I feel grateful that I can do my job from home. And, you know, for all the crap that TYT's management gets, they're really supportive and they do hear us out. And I really appreciate that. So thank you. So yeah, I think that's it. Let's end on that nice note of gratitude. Lots of gratitude toward you guys for supporting us throughout the years, for supporting us now. And thank you to John for stepping in every Wednesday and doing the show with me. Even with your insane work schedule.
Thank you.
I love doing the show with you. All right, guys, have an awesome night. We'll see you soon.